Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well today and enjoying your fall. I hope you've had a good week. It's actually been 2 weeks since we took last week off. Again, hope you're enjoying your fall. I know I have been. I've been watching a lot of baseball and getting outside a good bit. Last week we were able to restain our deck. So that's why I took last week off. My kids were on fall break, but I'm glad to be back in doing this. I do enjoy doing the live stream. I enjoy doing the study and the prep leading up to it. So thank you for joining me for this. We are in, I guess this would be week 3 of a series called Get Wisdom on the Wisdom Psalms. And we'll be diving into several different Psalms this morning. I don't watch a ton of movies anymore. I used to watch more. Some of them are really good, right? And some are really bad. One of the really bad movies that I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I remember pretty well is a 2000. The movie came out in 2000, and it stars Nicolas Cage. And the movie is called The Family Man. It also has Téa Leoni in the movie. And it's a kind of spin on the classic It's a Wonderful Life. So It's a Wonderful Life is a great story. It's a classic movie, great acting. The Family Man, not so much. You know the story of It's a Wonderful Life, right? George kind of gets to see what his life would be like if he had never been born. The Family Man is a little bit like that. It's also a Christmas movie. And the main character, played by Nicolas Cage, gets to see what his life would be like if he had taken a different direction. In the movie, I believe he's a tire salesman, runs a tire shop, and he gets to see what his life would have been like had he gone in a different direction and not kind of entered the family business. And his different life, he's a wealthy, I don't know, Wall Street exec or lawyer or something like that, living in a penthouse, driving a Ferrari, and all those great things, except he isn't married to the wife that he was in his kind of tire shop life, Téa Leoni. And he gets to kind of see from the outside what both versions of, actually not from the outside, from the inside, what both versions of his life would have been like. It's not a good movie. It's horribly cliche. It actually includes a scene of him running through the airport to catch her at the gate before, she flies away. So just all these kind of cliche things. But it does play on a really common human sentiment. And that's the what if. I'm sure all of us have, laid awake at night thinking, what if I had picked a different major in college? What if I had taken that job? Or what if we had moved? Or, things like this. These what ifs are kind of always there in the back of our mind. The Wisdom Psalms give us a peek into the what ifs a little bit, kind of like Nicolas Cage got in the movie. They give us 2 different paths, 2 different scenarios for living: wicked and righteous, foolishness and wisdom. And it holds up both of them and says, okay, these are your options, now pick. The last time we were together in a live stream, I talked about those 2 different categories of righteous and wicked, and certainly we hold to the truth that none of us is righteous, no, not one. And yet the Bible often seems to talk in terms of relative righteous, or relative righteousness, I should say. None of us live up to the standard of God's complete and unique righteousness. But there is kind of a relative righteousness. So the Bible can talk about Job or Noah being righteous or upright or even perfect. And compared to the rest of the world, they were. And we can grow in that kind of righteousness. We talked about that 3 weeks ago. But these wisdom psalms don't just kind of compare and contrast these 2 groups of people as far as their actions, but also in terms of their fates, their destinies, the outcomes of their actions. And you see the wisdom psalms hold up both a positive and a negative kind of incentive for choosing wisdom. On the negative end, the wicked end up with destruction. Is probably the single word to pick to describe their end, their fate. While on the positive kind of reinforcement, those who are righteous, those who are wise, end up, and if picking one word, I would pick the word blessed or blessedness. And so this morning, or I guess it's afternoon now, we're going to take a few minutes to look at how the Wisdom Psalms describe the outcomes of living righteous, the outcomes of living in wisdom. And kind of keep in mind both the positive and the negative aspects of the reinforcement that the Wisdom Psalms provide us. So I like starting with the bad news first. So how does the Wisdom Psalms portray the outcome of pursuing wickedness or folly or failing to live up to righteousness or wisdom? And again, I use the one simple word, destruction, but the Wisdom Psalms gives us a little bit more insight into what that looks like. So, for example, in Psalm 34, starting in verse 21, we read, "The evil will slay the wicked. The foes of the righteous will be condemned." So the wicked will be slain. They'll be destroyed. Psalm 37, you get the same kind of language, starting in verse 15. Starting in verse 14. "The wicked draw the sword and they bend the bow, but their swords will pierce their own hearts, and their bows will be broken." You could skip over to Psalm 112, another one of those wisdom psalms that we're looking at. And it says, "The wicked will see and be vexed. They will gnash their teeth and waste away. The longings of the wicked will come to nothing." So in these psalms, the negative incentive is put in terms of kind of temporal destruction. In this life, their longings will turn to nothing. In this life, they'll gnash their teeth. They'll be destroyed by violence. We'll look in a few minutes at what it talks about regarding their eternal state. But here this is speaking about kind of their temporal state, in the here and the now, in this life. And you have that negative component. And to those who are righteous, the Bible holds up very positive rewards. These are more common than what I just read about the wicked. You could start in Psalm 1, verse 3. The righteous person it's describing here is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. So you see kind of this theme of prosperity that is going to be pretty predominant in these wisdom psalms. Psalm 34, the same kind of thing. Those who fear him lack nothing. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Skip over to Psalm 37, and it says that those who delight in the Lord, he will give them the desires of their heart. Also, verse 18, "The blameless spend their days under the Lord's care, and their inheritance will endure forever. In times of disaster they will not wither, and in days of famine they will enjoy plenty." You can keep going in that same psalm. This is Psalm 37. "I have never seen the righteous forsaken, or their children begging bread." Let's see, where else? Psalm 111. He provides food for those who fear him. Psalm 112. "Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches will be in their houses. Good will come to them." And then Psalm 128, the last one that we'll look at. "You will eat the fruit of your labor," the psalmist says. "Blessing and prosperity will be yours. Your wife will be like the fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots all around your table." So the psalmists in all these different wisdom psalms are holding out prosperity as the reward for living righteous. And it seems to be prosperity in the here and in the now. The psalmists also hold out protection for those who are pursuing righteousness and living wisely. I'll just mention two. Psalm 34. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. The Lord will rescue his servants. Also, Psalm 37. Towards the end of the psalm, the salvation of the righteous comes from the Lord. He is their stronghold in time of trouble. The Lord helps them and delivers them. He delivers them from the wicked and saves them because they take refuge in him. So again, that to me seems to be very kind of temporal. The wicked are chasing, the wicked are pursuing, but the Lord will save. The Lord will protect. So you get these negative incentives. Don't pursue wickedness because it ends in violence, it ends in death, it ends in destruction. Instead, pursue righteousness, pursue wisdom, because it ends in prosperity. You will have riches and wealth and children, and it goes on, and the protection of the Lord. Now, let me ask you, do any of these Psalms, any of these verses that I read make you feel a little bit uncomfortable? Just a little bit? I mean, they make me feel hopeful that if I pursue righteousness and I pursue wisdom, these good things can be mine. But as a teacher, as a preacher, they make me really uncomfortable because I struggle with these, especially in light of the health and wealth prosperity gospel. If I was a health and wealth prosperity preacher, these would be my texts that I would go to most frequently. If you have faith and pursue righteousness, you will be rich. You will be healthy. You will experience the Lord's protection. But what about the wise, righteous Christian who's, starving in the Sudan or in Yemen? What about the faithful pastor who labors tirelessly their entire ministry career and they don't see growth? What about the martyrs? What about Jeremiah, great saint who was suffered and imprisoned and led, into captivity? What about those people who didn't experience this prosperity or this protection? Or what about Hugh Hefner and Larry Flint? Not righteous, not wise, the definition of wicked, and yet they seem, fat and happy. At least Hugh Hefner did until he died. How do we make sense of those things we observe with our eyes that don't seem to line up with what the wisdom psalms are teaching? That's a stumbling block for many. I think it can be for us. I think there's two keys. The first key is to recognize that wisdom, what wisdom literature is doing, and it isn't making promises. It encourages people towards attitudes and towards actions that will lead toward a desired goal, all other things being equal. But they're not promises. They're saying, if you want this goal of prosperity and the Lord's protection, then this is how you ought to live. It's not a guarantee that you'll be rich, but this is the best path to attain that goal. Imagine you were trying to teach your son about the dangers of gambling, and you tell him, hey, those who gamble away their paychecks end up in poverty and can't feed their families. And so as an object lesson, you take him to a casino and to the slots, and you put money in and you pull the slot, and you're trying to teach him that, you're going to lose all your money. But, he hits the jackpot. It doesn't negate the truth of what you were trying to teach him. And so what we see with our eyes in those rare instances of people, being successful despite pursuing wickedness and folly, doesn't negate the general truth. That's what these are. They're general truths, not promises. Again, another example, if you want kids who will follow the Lord, then the way to do that is to raise kids in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That doesn't mean there aren't exceptions, but if you want that goal, then this is the best path to take. I think that's the first key, understanding that wisdom literature are not promises, they're proverbs. They're guidelines to achieving a goal. The second key is, I think, maybe even more important, and that's reading these wisdom psalms in the context of the entire canon. Other scriptures ought to inform our interpretation of these wisdom psalms and wisdom literature as a whole. Sometimes that's referred to as the rule of faith, the idea that Scripture interprets Scripture, and that we interpret Scripture in light of the entirety of the canon. So Scripture as a whole casts these wisdom psalms that on the surface appear to be applicable to this life and maybe only this life, it casts them into an eternal perspective. So we read the guidance of these wisdom psalms, and we read them in light of Job, a righteous man who suffered greatly. We read them in light of Ecclesiastes, another book of wisdom literature. We read these wisdom psalms in light of the stories of Joseph and of Jeremiah. We read these wisdom psalms in light of the Sermon on the Mount that promises eternal blessings to those who are meek and poor in spirit. We read them in light of the book of Revelation that shows the ultimate reversal of misfortune for God's people. So we have to read these in terms of the full context of Scripture and the eternal context that Scripture places these promises or these wisdom psalms in. And there's actually indication in these wisdom psalms that that's how they're supposed to be read. Even Psalm 1 sets this in the context of final affirmation for the righteous, the wise, and condemnation for the wicked. So verse 5 says, "The wicked will not stand in the judgment." It might go fine for them in this life, for their 80 and however many years they live, but it won't in eternity when they stand before the bar of God's judgment. You can look at Psalm 34 and you see the same kind of thing. When you set this, the one who takes refuge in God will not be condemned. In other words, will not be condemned by God. Psalm 37 really makes this incredibly explicit. He's talking about the righteous, and he says he's going to make the righteous reward shine like the dawn, their vindication like the noonday sun. Not necessarily a vindication in the here and the now, but their eternal vindication will shine like the noonday sun. He says, "Look around, in a little while the wicked will be no more. Though you look for them, they will not be found. The meek will inherit the land. They will enjoy peace and prosperity. The Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming." The day of reckoning might not be right now. They might, again, live fat and happy, but the day of reckoning is coming. Still, Psalm 37, "The wicked will perish." It goes on and on. We could read these passages, for about another half hour. One of the key indications that the righteous are supposed to expect eternal rewards is how often the word forever appears. So still in Psalm 37, "Turn from good and do evil, then you will dwell in the land forever." That's not, for a nice, good, long life. It's forever, indicating the righteous look to inherit eternity. The righteous will inherit the land and dwell in it forever. Psalm 43 is maybe even more explicit. 49 is even more explicit still. It holds up the righteous and the wicked, those who prosper and those who are poor. It says they both die. Everybody dies. The rich can't take it with them. People, it says in verse 12, despite their wealth, do not endure. They are like beasts that perish. So their wealth cannot spare them from death. And it goes on. This is the fate of all those who trust in themselves. They are like sheep that are destined to die. Death will be their shepherd. but the upright will prevail over them in the morning. What does that mean, in the morning? The psalmist is pointing us ahead to the morning of the resurrection. After we've all slept the sleep of death, the righteous prevail in the morning. The psalmist continues, God will redeem me from the realm of the dead. He will surely take me to himself. And to cap it off, Psalm 73, which is probably my favorite psalm, really drives this point home beautifully. The psalmist is struggling. He does see what I was describing. The wicked, they're getting ahead. They're arrogant. They're acting as if no one's going to hold them to account. And he said, that almost made me slip and fall. I thought, it's been vain that I've kept myself righteous and I followed the path of wisdom. But then I go to the temple, I go to the house of the Lord, and I discern, it says, their final destiny. Verse 17, I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood there the wicked's final destiny. They're on slippery ground. They're going to be cast down to ruin. They're going to be destroyed, swept away by terrors. They'll be despised as fantasies. And he says, but, even though I'm going to die eventually, afterward, you will take me to glory. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all those who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, he says, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge, and I will tell of all your deeds. He's painting this in terms of kind of eternal destinies. They perish, but I'll be with you in glory. So it's not in vain that I've kept myself upright and righteous and followed the path of wisdom. So it sets these things in terms of eternity, and I think the wisdom psalms spiritualize these concepts of, for example, being rich and being prosperous. It doesn't mean just having a lot of gold. It means being rich in spirit. Two key passages for me in that regard. Psalm 37, verse 4. Take delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. At first blush, when I think, what are the desires of my heart? I'd really love a 69 Camaro. I could list off all of these very kind of earthly desires. But if I'm taking delight in the Lord, then the desire of my hearts will be more of the Lord. So it takes these things that on the surface might seem to be about riches and wealth, and it spiritualizes them and says, if your heart's in the right place, then being rich is being rich in relationship to the Lord. Psalm 73 makes the same kind of point. The psalmist gets to the place where he says, whom have I in heaven but you? The earth has nothing I desire besides you. I might be beat down, I might be poor financially, but that's okay. Earth has nothing I desire more than you. So give me more of yourself. That's how I'll be rich. That's the blessing of righteousness. That's the blessing of pursuing wisdom. Being in right, good relationship with the Lord and experiencing more of him. These wisdom psalms are kind of like sign markers on a road. Sign markers that say, danger, don't go that way. Here's the path you want. Here's your destination that way. And they point us towards God and righteousness. A couple kind of applications, I guess. I am in the process still of raising kids. My youngest is now 14, got one in college, one in high school. But when you're in the process of raising kids, it seems like everyone has an opinion on how to do that right, especially those who don't have any kids. But I remember one of the things that we were taught often or advised often when we were raising our kids was not to bribe them. We rejected that, honestly. We bribe our kids. When we go to the grocery store when they were little, we'd say, hey, if you're good, I'll get you a candy bar on the way out. There's a few things we never did bribe them for. We never paid for good grades or things like that, but we did bribe and I think I would use the term positive incentives. We offered positive incentives for doing right and doing good and being wise and making good decisions. And I think that's good. It's not just punishments for doing wrong. It's biblical to offer positive incentives for doing right. If it wasn't right, God wouldn't do it. But God does. He gives us positive incentives to pursue righteousness, to pursue wisdom. And I think we can do that for our kids as well. I think we can embrace that for our lives. There's a version of kind of Christian living that is so stoic that it says if you're enjoying it, you're not doing it right. It's based in kind of a Kantian ethic. Kantian ethics is, from Immanuel Kant, an 18th century philosopher, who in essence said that you have to do what's right simply because it's right, not for any kind of reward, not because you desire something. That's not Christian ethics, though. When we adopt that kind of Kantian ethic, we end up trying to be more spiritual, more righteous than God, who holds out benefits for us for doing good. Jesus himself, it says that in Hebrews chapter 12, that because of the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. So he was incentivized by a positive reward, and he did good. I don't think we should try to be more spiritual than Jesus in our pursuit of the good. So we can rightly understand these rewards. They're eternal, they're spiritual, they're not necessarily in the here and the now and health and wealth, prosperity kind of stuff. But those eternal, those spiritual, those good rewards that God holds out for us ought to motivate us to choose the right and to choose the wise. That's all I had for this afternoon. Next week, we've talked now about kind of the destiny, the fate of these two groups. Next week, I want to talk about what the path looks like as you tread the path of righteousness or as you're treading the path of wickedness. How do you know which path you're on so that you could choose the right path? What do they look like? We'll talk about that next week. I guess I can close with kind of a commercial. If you're tuning in, love it. Awesome. Thank you very much. You can also check out our ACGs. They are Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock. Right now I'm teaching one on Micah, and my friend Jerry Frederick is doing one on the book of 1 Timothy. Both are available on the ACG website, of the ECC website. And then obviously our Sunday morning services are live streaming as well, and we'd love for you to take advantage of those. Hope you're doing well, and if there's anything we can be doing to be in support of you in prayer or in kind of tangible ways, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.